Once, there was a mighty red dragon driven by vengeance against humanity for the slaughter of its kin. Its ambitions crumbled in a decisive battle, leaving bitterness and hatred in its heart. In its final moments, it believed its thirst for vengeance would remain unquenched. But fate had a cruel twist in store for the dragon. Inexplicably, it was reborn as a helpless human baby, a twist that defied all expectations. The dragon couldn't fathom how these puny humans had managed to defeat him. He had never imagined it possible. This time, they had gathered an entire squad of capable individuals, each armed to the teeth. The dragon couldn't help but think, it's over. The humans had a mysterious witch leading them, someone who directed their attacks with precision, targeting the dragon's weak points. The dragon marveled at the competence of the humans on the battlefield. It was as if they had assembled an elite squad with full sets of armaments. With a resolute shout, the witch declared the end for the monstrous being. To every human present, this was the culmination of their efforts, the end the behemoth deserved. As he faced his end, the dragon couldn't help but reflect. Did he truly deserve this fate? He had never intruded into human territory. In fact, humans had relentlessly attacked him for millennia. They had hunted him down repeatedly, sacrificing their own kind to do so. The dragon's memory was fragmented, with recollections of humans relentlessly pursuing him. Whenever he found a place to call home, humans would appear out of nowhere, attacking him and those he cared about for no reason. They killed his friends, wiped out his family, and displayed their remains as trophies of brutality. Finally, the dragon had reached his breaking point. With a furious roar, he unleashed a massive flame, incinerating everything around him. He had become the last dragon, with nothing left to his name and no one left to lose. Revenge was the sole reason for his existence. Surrounded by the very humans he loathed, he could finally close his eyes and rest. The last legendary red dragon had fallen, seeking peace in his slumber. In the depths of his dreams, he heard a sweet voice calling him affectionately. A blinding light drew nearer, and he felt utter confusion. Emerging from the light was a smiling human holding a tiny, delightful baby. The dragon couldn't comprehend why he was in the arms of a human. All he knew was that he needed to escape this place as soon as possible. He tried to feel for his wings, but they were nowhere to be found. Outwardly, he resembled a normal, tantrum-throwing infant. Inwardly, he dreaded the possibility that he had become a human. The man holding him celebrated proudly in front of his wife, declaring that the baby liked him. Inside the newborn dragon, a sense of humiliation burned. He wanted this filthy human to release him immediately. He couldn't tolerate such humiliation after all he had endured. Rei had no intentions of letting these humans treat him like an ordinary baby. Deep inside, he harbored a burning desire to unleash his fiery wrath and show them the true power they were dealing with. To them, he appeared as nothing more than a trembling infant, leaving the man and woman in bed utterly clueless about his true nature. Once he believed he had stored enough fiery power, Rei decided to release it. However, instead of the destructive dragon breath he had once commanded, all he managed to produce was a tiny glob of spit. His mighty magic had been reduced to a mere droplet. The man was taken aback by the baby's peculiar actions, while Rei himself questioned what had happened to his once monumental magic. The woman, seemingly unperturbed, reached out to pick him up, her sweet words filled with terrifying implications. In her larger, human hands, Rei felt immense fear. He had been thrust into a life of torment, with this beautiful woman welcoming him into a world he didn't understand. To him, Rei sounded like a laughable, insignificant name for a being with a dragon's heart. These humans were entirely oblivious to the powerful dragon spirit residing within him. Rei felt a surge of determination. If fate had granted him this second chance at life as a human, he was determined to exact his revenge. Just as they had done to his brethren, he would make humans pay for their crimes. With his new human body, he vowed to kill every single one of them. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. He was destined to become a menace to society. The infant's laughter took on a devious tone, leaving the man puzzled by how such a small newborn could seem so naughty. He couldn't shake the feeling that this baby was going to be a handful. Regardless, this was their child, their beloved baby. As Rei's tiny brain filled with thoughts of annihilation, exhaustion washed over him. Controlling his baby mouth had drained his energy, and he drifted off to sleep. He couldn't help but criticize the weakness of the human body. Planning humanity's downfall while needing a nap seemed absurd. When he opened his eyes, he found himself under a wide blue sky, surrounded by the refreshing embrace of nature. Time passed and Rei, now living as a human, had learned much about mankind. He had even discovered the names of his parents, Scarlet and Jake. Scarlett's beauty matched her kind and gentle personality, while Jake's muscular physique set him apart as a strong and capable human. Their visitors arrived, and Scarlett and Jake welcomed them with open arms. The villagers held the couple in high regard, praising Jake for his remarkable swordsmanship and Scarlett for her formidable magical abilities. Their humility in response to such praise only endeared them further to the villagers. As Ray, their baby, crawled on the floor, the villagers marveled at his intelligence. Most children his age couldn't communicate their hunger, yet Ray did so effortlessly. They also noticed the subtle reddish tint to his hair, a curious development in a child so young. According to Jake, Ray's hair had started turning red a few days ago. In Ray's mind, his thoughts continued to swirl with questions and plans. Ray's fiery hair continued to grow, a clear sign that some of his dragon powers remained within him. He could almost sense his dragon form emerging, ready to be unleashed upon the world. As the visitors bid farewell, Jake requested their help in chasing away the beasts plaguing their farms. The dependable man assured them he would personally take care of the issue. Once outside the Talon house, the villagers began to gossip among themselves, questioning if the Talon family might be cursed. Ray overheard their words and interpreted it as fear of his red hair, reveling in the intimidation he believed it caused. Scarlett lifted Ray onto the feeding table, her and Jake's unconditional love and care confusing him. No matter how mischievous he was, they never scolded him. He had even attempted outlandish pranks, like peeing in Jake's mouth while he slept, but his parents had simply laughed it off. Scarlet Talon possessed incredible water mage abilities, a rarity even among adventurers. Ray couldn't help but think that having such magic at his disposal would make his future revenge even more achievable. At the age of 2, children had the chance to undergo a mage evaluation to determine their potential for mana. Today was Ray's assessment day, and his father wished him good luck before he embarked on the journey. As the carriage set off, Ray was brimming with confidence, believing he was destined to pass and reclaim his draconic magic. After a long carriage ride, Ray was awakened by his mother's cheerful voice. He observed the bustling town with a mixture of curiosity and concern, particularly regarding his frail human body. They strolled through the central marketplace, where merchants hawked their wares and businessmen pursued profits. One well-to-do merchant boasted about his intermediate quality beast crystals when a beggar approached them, asking for food. The merchant cruelly scolded and kicked the beggar, showing no compassion. Ray watched this scene unfold with a sense of tragedy. Despite all being humans, they ridiculed and belittled those weaker than themselves. In his previous life, he had considered it his duty to protect the weak, regardless of their form or species. Although he had failed in his past life, he remained committed to that ideal. Dragons, he thought, had the right attitude. While being carried in his mother's arms, they finally arrived at the bustling Roland Academy. The line to take the mage evaluation extended from the academy entrance, and Ray eagerly joined it. An attendant guided them, ensuring an orderly queue where candidates would be called by name. Ray had never seen so many people in one place, and his excitement soared. In the background, those who had failed the test grieved, their disappointment palpable. Ray's determination burned. He was confident he'd ace this mage assessment. The candidate ahead of them created a scene, throwing a tantrum over her perceived unfairness of the assessment after failing. Ray found this all too familiar. In his eyes, this world had always been unjust. Finally, an attendant called Ray's name, marking his turn to undergo the mage evaluation. Scarlett and Ray were asked to step forward, and a hint of nervousness flickered on Scarlett's face. This was the moment of truth for Ray. The robed, bearded facilitator of the evaluation instructed Ray to place his hands on a crystal ball. If he had magic aptitude, it would glow, and the color would reveal his elemental affinity. Ray eagerly complied, confident that the mighty red dragon within him would astound everyone. As moments passed, Ray began to hear his mother cry behind him. He initially attributed it to her being overwhelmed by his magical talent or the shared elemental affinity. However, when the crystal ball remained unlit, he realized something was amiss. The facilitator concluded the evaluation, declaring Ray without magic aptitude. Ray found this verdict absurd. After all, when had anyone ever heard of a dragon without magical capabilities? In his past life, he'd been the most potent red dragon. Scarlett appealed to the facilitator, unwilling to accept the results. She graduated from this very academy, making it hard to believe her child had no magical talent. Ray, however, couldn't stand this perceived disrespect. He aggressively tapped the crystal ball in frustration, convinced it was malfunctioning. He was determined to prove them wrong. The facilitator, apologizing again, took the crystal ball away. But Rei refused to relent. He stood up, grabbing onto the facilitator's long white beard, convinced the man was lying to them. Guards had to be called to intervene. Late at night, Rei and his mother boarded the carriage once more, heading home. Rei pondered whether this was a punishment from the heavens for his past actions. If so, what was the point of his reincarnation? However, a thought occurred to him. Perhaps the heavens were testing him. Rei remained optimistic, determined to find another way to exact his revenge. Morning came, and the Talon family gathered for breakfast, their mood subdued. Rei broke the silence, calling out to his father. He asked Jake to teach him how to fight, a request that brought a smile to Jake's face, eager to impart his knowledge of swordsmanship. Rei's next move was to become a red-haired Zoro. Learning magic might not be in the cards, but he could still pursue swordsmanship. Revenge was his driving force, and he was determined to achieve it one way or another. Facing him with a confident smile stood his father. For 2 years he had been learning swordsmanship from Jake, but he had yet to win even once. They both wielded wooden swords. With a serious expression, Rei intended to change his zero-win record today. Drawing his wooden sword, he saw his chance as Jake swung his sword wide with a casual smile. Rei just needed to seize the moment and pit it at the exact time Jake swung down. Victory seemed within reach. But as he was about to execute his move, he slipped on the grass. Frustration washed over him as he questioned why things always turned out this way. Before he could recover from his blunder, the wooden sword was already dangerously close to his face. With a wooden thud, he was knocked out cold. He couldn't understand why his body never seemed to keep up with his mind. When he woke up, Scarlet was tending to his injuries while Jake chuckled at another loss for his son. Scarlet scolded Jake for not holding back with their 4-year-old, fearing that he would not pass the night trials if this continued. Jake reasoned that Rei was simply young and needed time to develop control over his body. They had a year left, and Rei could still enter the Avrian Academy. Rei reassured his parents, determined to prove himself. He believed that as the reincarnation of a red dragon, he could never be as weak as a mere human. He expressed his determination to become the strongest. Back on the training grounds, Rei knew he was more capable than humans of his age, but what he lacked was control. The human body frustrated him with its clumsiness, forcing him to move each limb separately. He swung his wooden sword tirelessly, seeking improvement. Then Jake surprised him by handing him a real steel sword. Rei was taken aback by this gift, a weapon almost as tall as he was. His father believed that practicing with a real sword would improve his control faster. Smiling, Jake whispered to Rei about another gift waiting for him in their house's storage room. Rei's father had one more surprise in store, a magic puppet. Although it appeared ordinary, it was powered by magic, making it a unique and exciting gift. The students of Avrian Knight Academy used these objects for training. As Rei stared at the so-called magic puppet, he couldn't see what was so special about it. To convince him, Jake urged his son to give it a try. Rei cautiously approached the puppet, gripping his wooden sword. With a straightforward rush, he launched his attack. Surprisingly, the puppet sprang to life, activating its level 1 capability. Rei was taken aback as his wide swing met the puppet's wooden shield. Panic briefly set in as the puppet countered with a swing of its blade, knocking Rei's weapon from his hand. In a single exchange, the puppet had defeated him and concluded its level 1 operation. Rei's defeat was evident. Jake watched with a smile from a distance, pleased with his son's reaction to the gift. He reassured Rei that if he could conquer the first level of the puppet, it would guarantee his success in the exams. The puppet had been obtained through many of Jake's connections as a thoughtful gift for his son. Rei, despite his initial shock at losing to the puppet, was now fueled by determination. He was resolute in his goal to triumph over this puppet. In the serene surroundings under the clear blue skies, the sound of determined grunts filled the air as Rei swung his sword repeatedly. However, his movements still lagged behind his thoughts. As Rei lay in frustration, his sword nearby, he realized that this human body was holding him back. He needed to improve significantly to defeat even the first level of the puppet, let alone seek revenge against humanity. As he tried to stand, he heard an unfamiliar voice questioning why he wanted to battle a puppet. Alarmed, he readied himself for a counterattack, demanding to know who was there. To his surprise, he was met by a blonde girl in a red hooded cloak, about the same age as him. She introduced herself as Amy and explained that she lived in a nearby village. She had noticed him still on the mountain at this late hour and had come to remind him to leave before dark. Rei relaxed, realizing that she meant no harm. She continued by explaining that the area near the magic forest was dangerous at night due to magic beasts. Rei hadn't been aware that magic beasts roamed this area. Amy seemed knowledgeable about the mountains, as she often gathered fruits and vegetables nearby. She offered to accompany him down the mountain as the sun was setting, and he agreed. As they walked, he made a mental note of her name, Amy. Before he could introduce himself, she interrupted, already knowing his name. Rei was famous in the village, and he couldn't escape the attention. While the villagers praised his size and growth, there was an underlying fear of his supposed curse due to his red hair. They respected his parents but regarded him with unfounded fear, making him feel like a foreign entity in the village. Each whispered remark stung him deeply, and he couldn't help but feel like an outcast, even though his parents were still alive. Terrifying red dragons to frighten their children. Red was a color symbolizing strength and evil in human society, which was ironic considering that it was the greedy humans who had driven the dragons to near extinction. Now, they were the ones being painted as evil in stories. Dragons used their immense power and fire to seek revenge and protect themselves, but humans interpreted it as proof of their brutality. Amy noticed that Rei had stopped in his tracks and called out to him to hurry up. As they walked side by side, leaving the mountains behind, Amy mentioned that she had seen him around these parts quite often lately. Rei confirmed that he had been practicing swordsmanship, intending to become a swordsman like his father. Amy knew that Rei's father was the only swordsman in the village and asked if he planned to sign up for the Knight Academy. Rei confirmed his intention to do so. Amy shared that her brother was also planning to take the exam. She thought her brother might be a bit envious of Rei since he had Jake as a mentor, while others in the village couldn't learn proper swordsmanship. She suggested that Rei and her brother could become friends and practice together. As they were about to exit the mountains, they heard the sound of approaching footsteps. A loud, overbearing voice called out to them. It was a similarly blonde boy with his two sidekicks, addressing Rei as Red Hair and demanding that he leave his sister alone. The boy's face was indeed punchable, and his confrontational attitude irked Rei. Amy stepped between them and called her brother Gary out for being rude when Rei hadn't done anything wrong. Gary questioned his sister for hanging around with red hair and warned her that Rei's curse might be contagious. He even checked to see if her hair had turned red. Gary's two cronies approached Rei arrogantly, hurling insults and trash-talking him. They called him shameless and told him to leave the village. They mocked Rei's parents, insinuating that they couldn't sympathize with the common folk. Rei clenched his fist in anger as he endured the insults, but when the group walked away, he couldn't take it anymore. He angrily called out to them, and in a split second, his fist was hurtling through the air, aimed at the face of the goon who had been talking trash. Gary quickly shoved the guy aside, taking the punch with his arm guard, but it still caused him sharp pain. Rei's punch sent the goon flying, and Gary warned his cronies not to interfere. He offered to fight Rei without using a weapon, thinking that Rei had probably received extensive training from his adventurer parents. Amy tried her best to stop the impending fight, but Rei seemed ready for the challenge. With tensions rising, Rei and Gary appeared on the verge of a showdown, while Amy did her best to prevent the confrontation. Rei was ready for the challenge as he threw his sword aside, assuming a fighting stance. He turned towards Gary and his sidekicks, prepared to face them all at once. The sounds of blows being exchanged echoed through the woods, accompanied by cheers from Gary's cronies and Amy's desperate cries for them to stop. After several exchanges, Rei was finally struck by a solid punch to the face, sending him sprawling to the ground. His coin sack flew out of his pockets during the fall, and Gary promptly caught it. He urged Rei to admit defeat, but Rei, determined and frustrated, struggled to stand back up despite the dirt and bruises covering his body. Gary continued to belittle Rei, claiming that he was too weak and disappointing. He insinuated that Rei had received special treatment from his father during training and still couldn't measure up. In the end, Gary urged Rei to give up on becoming a swordsman and focus on something he was actually good at. Rei fell onto the grass, battered and defeated, the echo of Gary's harsh words ringing in his ears. Back in an ordinary house in the village, Gary and Amy arrived home. Amy scolded her brother for going too far, but Gary insisted that Rei deserved it. He warned his sister to stay away from the red-haired kid, as many people were scared of that cursed hair color. He emphasized that they were different from the Talon family, whose parents were just ordinary people. Frustrated, Amy screamed at her brother that she hated him and stormed off, leaving Gary, dirty and bruised, to tend to himself. At the Talon house, Rei had finally picked himself up and walked back home. His mother cheerfully prepared dinner and welcomed her son back from training. However, upon seeing Rei covered in bruises and dirt, she grew concerned and asked if he had been in a fight. Rei shrugged it off, claiming it was just practice, but Scarlet wouldn't let it go. She suspected that he was being bullied by the village kids, though Rei continued to deny it. Despite her worries about her son's injuries leaving scars, Rei insisted that it was alright because he was a man. Jake, the carefree father, smiled with approval, praising Rei for his dedication to training. Rei informed his parents that he wanted to continue practicing, and he headed to the storage room. There he activated the magic puppet to level 1 and began combat training. The puppet dashed towards him with a shield bash, but Rei skillfully dodged it. However, his wooden sword got caught on a pillar in the storage room, distracting him. Seizing the opportunity, the magic puppet struck Rei at the back of his head while he was off guard. The next day, Rei found himself back in the beautiful mountains, surrounded by lush greenery and a bright blue sky. As he headed to his usual training spot, he spotted a familiar figure waiting for him. It was Amy. She looked a bit nervous, scanning the area as if she'd been waiting for him. When she saw Rei approaching, her cheerful expression turned into embarrassment, no doubt remembering what her brother had done. But she greeted Rei with a wide smile, waving joyfully. It was clear she'd been waiting for this moment to apologize in person. Rei, the forgiving soul, assured her that it wasn't a big deal and certainly not her fault. After all, he realized that he simply wasn't strong enough to fend off her brother. Amy's eyes welled up with genuine remorse, and Rei couldn't help but think that humans were indeed a troublesome bunch. It appeared he needed to work on his social skills at such a young age. Rei walked closer to Amy, plucked an apple from her basket, took a bite, and declared it as a symbol of accepting her apology. Amy reassured him that her brother Gary wouldn't trouble him anymore. From that day onward, Amy would be there at the same time and place, sometimes chatting away while Rei diligently swung his sword, other times sitting in peaceful silence, absorbed in her book. Before long, Rei had grown used to her presence, and a friendship blossomed. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the Talon family home, a cavalry of armored soldiers and combat horses had gathered. The leader of the troops delivered great news to Jake and Scarlet. The nearby villages had also been attacked by the same mysterious threat. There were no clear witnesses, but victims had been infected, rendering them unable to explain what had happened. The leader sought Jake and Scarlet's assistance. Scarlet knew that these creatures typically didn't appear near human settlements, and the situation was far from normal. She proposed that she accompany her husband on this mission, but Jake, with unwavering confidence, assured her that it would be a routine reconnaissance mission. Besides, Rei was about to take the Avrian Mage Academy's entrance exam, so one of them needed to stay with their son. He comforted her, promising to return quickly and stay safe. Back in the mountains, the setting sun painted the skies with vibrant hues as Rei struggled to catch his breath after a day of rigorous training. He turned to find Amy quietly absorbed in her book, bathed in the sunset's brilliance. It sent his heart racing, and he had to snap himself out of a daydream, blushing in embarrassment. Rei approached Amy and suggested they call it a day and head home. She was so engrossed in her book and the serene surroundings that she hadn't even realized how late it had gotten. On the way home, Rei couldn't help but ask if she was facing any trouble in the village because of her friendship with him, given all the rumors circulating about him. Rei couldn't help but worry about how his red hair curse might affect Amy. He was concerned that she could be dragged into his troubles. However, Amy was resolute in her belief that it was their problem, not hers. She found Rei's red hair rather cool, and beyond that, she saw him as a special person deep inside. With her signature bright smile, she encouraged Rei to just be himself, and it warmed his heart. Amy's words reminded him of Gary's hurtful remarks, pushing him to find something he was good at. A smile slowly spread across his face as he felt something click. He eagerly thanked Amy for clearing his mind, and with newfound excitement, he rushed back home, looking forward to their next meeting. Back in the middle of the night, within the Talon House's storage room, the magic puppet activated to its first level. Rei bit down on the wooden sword's handle, crouched on all fours, and unleashed his true self. With nimble and natural movements, he moved like a wild beast, realizing that he was much more agile using all his limbs. Now was the time to put his newfound skills to the test. The magic puppet swung its wooden sword, and Rei jumped high above, landing swiftly behind the puppet. The robotic voice informed him that he had passed level 1, and Rei celebrated this victory. His idea of returning to his dragon-like fighting style had paid off. As the sun rose, the Talon household bustled with Jake's preparations. Rei had just woken up and saw his father fully armored, getting ready for a quest. Jake apologized to his son for having to leave temporarily, but assured him that he would return in time for the Night Academy exam. Encouraging Ray to practice with the puppet in his absence, Jake left with a confident smile, believing in his son's abilities. The driver of the carriage called for Jake's departure, and Scarlett handed him his longsword. The couple exchanged affectionate words before parting ways, leaving Ray with a sense of reassurance. As Ray made his way to his training spot on the mountain, he contemplated how his father would react to his newfound strength. He was determined to impress him upon his return. He credited Amy for helping him find a solution to his training struggles. While Ray still had reservations about humans, he couldn't help but feel a growing connection to his parents, Jake and Scarlett, and a sense of becoming more human as time passed. Ray, with the weight of his past and the recent lessons he had learned, found himself back at his usual training spot. He was determined not to seek revenge on those few who had treated him decently, like Amy, his dear friend. As he trained tirelessly, the thought of Amy crossed his mind, and he couldn't help but feel expectant, even embarrassed by his own feelings. He reminded himself that it was better that she wasn't there, as he needed to focus on his training. Time was of the essence, and he couldn't afford to be swayed by human emotions any longer. Hours passed, and the sun began to set. Ray, now lying on the comfortable-looking grass, woke up with a start. It was already late, and he knew he'd be in trouble with his mom if he didn't hurry home. As he rushed back to the village, thoughts of Amy returned. He hadn't properly thanked her for her advice, but he decided to do so tomorrow. Ray made it back to the village without any issues, but the sky had grown dark. Villagers were frantically gathering, holding torches, and searching for something or someone. Gary and Amy's father had a desperate look in his eyes as he asked the village blacksmith if he had seen his children. The blacksmith mentioned that he had seen the kids buying weapons earlier, saying something about going to the forest to hunt magic beasts. The news hit Amy and Gary's parents hard, and the villagers criticized the blacksmith for allowing the children to buy weapons. Gary and Amy's father immediately took action, calling for the guards to join the search for their kids. Ray, on the other hand, casually walked past the panicked villagers, his mind focused solely on the fate of Gary's group. He felt that they were getting a taste of their own medicine, but he didn't wish harm upon Amy, who had treated him kindly. However, she was stuck with her reckless brother, and Ray couldn't shake off the thought that karma was at play. As the villagers organized a search party with torches in hand, Ray's cold perspective started to shift. He couldn't ignore the image of Amy's lively face calling out to him, and he realized he had a choice to make. Despite his initial reluctance, he turned back, a sense of urgency taking over. He knew he couldn't abandon Amy, the one person who had shown him kindness. With determination, Ray rushed toward the forest, hoping that Amy was safe and waiting for him. He hadn't thanked her properly for her help with the puppet, and he wasn't about to let her down now. Deep in the forest, wolf beast bodies were scattered about, and Ray was determined to find her. On the ground, amidst the fallen wolves, lay Gary's two sidekicks, unconscious. Gary himself stood bravely, clutching a sword as he attempted to shield Amy from the menacing creature they faced. Amy cried out in fear, her brother trembling as he tried to gather his resolve. They were confronted by a battle-scarred, three-eyed magical wolf beast, a monstrous adversary. Ray, aware that he was running out of time, sprinted as fast as his legs could carry him. Gasping for breath, he pushed himself to his limits, desperately plunging deeper into the forest. As he went further, the scent of fresh blood hung in the air, raising the stakes. It seemed that Amy might indeed be in grave danger. When he reached the scene and leaned against a tree for support, he found disappointment instead of relief. The scent led to a young demonic wolf with a blade wound on its stomach, recently injured. Ray was puzzled. It seemed the kids had killed a young pup. Confusingly, the footsteps around were all jumbled, making it difficult for him to determine the direction to follow. While pondering his next move, a familiar scream pierced the air. It was Amy's voice. Yuri, the leader of Gary's group, was taking on the massive demonic wolf and, as expected, was getting battered, crashing into the trees. Meanwhile, Amy rushed to her brother's side. The demonic wolf, undeterred, leaped forward, its jaws wide open, emitting a savage howl as it descended upon them, its intent clear, to devour the children. Helpless, Amy closed her eyes, resigned to their grim fate. She cried out for anyone to help them. In the midst of the chaos, blood spurted onto the ground. Then, a gleam of steel caught Amy's eye. It was Ray wielding his sword. He thrust it into the beast's mouth, stopping its attack. Ray had arrived in the nick of time, a true savior. He asked if Amy was all right, and she confirmed her safety. But the other kids were in bad shape. Without warning, the demonic wolf launched another assault, this time scratching Rei on the shoulder. Rei stumbled backward, struggling to maintain his balance. He quickly reassured Amy that he wouldn't go down so easily. Rei formulated a plan to lead the monstrous wolf away from Amy. He jumped onto a tree branch, and the beast adjusted its position, preparing to pounce. Rei narrowly evaded the attack, showcasing his incredible agility. But deep down, he was frustrated with his own weakness. He was barely holding his own against the demonic wolf. In the past, such a creature would have posed no threat to him, but now he was nearing his limit. Despite his exceptional speed, he couldn't divert the wolf's attention away from Amy for long. The demonic wolf responded to Rei's call and charged once more, jaws open wide. Rei knew he had to make this attack count. He met the ferocious charge head-on, sword in hand, under the crimson moonlight. Rei clenched his teeth and clung onto the wolf's snout determined. With a swift and skillful swing, he struck one of the beast's three eyes, making him seem like a character out of Demon Slayer. The wolf howled in pain, attempting to shake him off, sending him hurtling toward the ground. Despite his grievous injuries, Rei managed to stand and shield Amy. In the past, he could have easily torn apart this demonic wolf with a single blow. But now he was reliant on a human weapon, his trusty sword, to face it with one eye less. The demonic wolf charged again, seemingly undeterred. Rei saw an opening in its attack, grasping the opportunity to sever one of its legs with a swift swing of his blade. The wolf landed heavily, closer to where Emmy and Gary were. The impact of the beast's landing sent Emmy and Gary flying. They struggled to get up, and Rei rushed to check on their well-being. The wolf, desperate and injured, tried to reach them with its sharp claws, but managed to land a critical strike on Rei, slashing his skin. Rei, now with the sword back in his teeth, was determined to end the fight. He wanted the monster to submit to him. He spun through the air like a tornado, slicing and dicing through the wolf's massive body, delivering a spectacular finisher. The demonic wolf was so severely wounded that blood gushed from multiple parts of its colossal form. Rei had exerted all his power and stamina to execute that deadly move. He tumbled to the ground, looking around to find Amy and her brother. They lay unconscious nearby. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something peculiar, a strange alert and a small burning fire that materialized into a cute, fiery draconic creature. It held up a sign indicating a reward, unlocking the initial stages of the blessing of the dragon's eye and obtaining an intermediate-grade beast crystal. Rei contemplated whether to absorb the beast crystal, while the adorable draconic creature continued to make cheerful sounds. He disregarded the prompt, considering it a bunch of useless information. His priority was to locate and save Amy and her brother to prevent attracting more magic beasts. Summoning every ounce of strength, Rei struggled to stand, his wounds still oozing blood. Gary regained consciousness for a moment and recognized Rei as the boy he had beaten earlier, the one who had just saved them from certain death. Rei instructed him not to move as he carried both Gary and Amy. His strength was pushed to its absolute limit. The brother and sister had passed out, while Rei, with his severe injuries, persevered. He covered the other two unconscious children with loose twigs and rocks to shield them from potential danger, doing all he could with the resources at hand. The rest was left to fate as they remained deep within the forest. The villagers grew more agitated as their search party failed to find any clues about the missing children in the thick forest. Frustration was mounting among them. Suddenly, their eyes lit up as they spotted the red-haired kid from the Talon family, battered and covered in blood, carrying the two blonde siblings. They immediately tried to contact the parents and urged them to come to the scene. Rei, exhausted and suffering from grievous injuries, pleaded with the adults to help the kids, who needed immediate healing. Then he collapsed onto the ground. The villagers began murmuring among themselves, puzzled by the fact that these children had willingly entered the forest filled with magic beasts at night. They couldn't fathom why the kids would take such a risk. Amid the crowd, a frantic mother, bearing a resemblance to a lunch lady, rushed through, pushing people aside. She was the mother of the other two missing kids, Bob and Kyle. Upon learning that only the two blonde siblings had made it out of the magic forest, she refused to accept this information. She attempted to rush into the forest, but was stopped by the villagers who told her it was too dangerous to go in alone. Determined to rescue her sons, she forced her way through the crowd, accusing the villagers of cowardice for not searching for her children. She ran across the bridge, firmly believing her boys were waiting for her rescue. As she called out anxiously to her kids, she felt the ominous presence of magical beasts lurking in the forest's darkness. Sensing a beast with three eyes, she panicked and fled the forest, humiliated by her own cowardice. Turning her attention to the exhausted and injured Ray, she grabbed him by the collar and aggressively interrogated him about Bob and Kyle's whereabouts. She refused to believe her sons would willingly enter the forest. She accused Ray of tricking them and demanded he confess. She even slapped Ray hard, convinced that his red hair was a sign of calamity and misfortune. The villagers started whispering among themselves, joining the notion that Ray was responsible for leading the kids into the dangerous forest because he was the only one to return awake. They formed a mob against him, pouring blame without hesitation. The lady continued to slap him relentlessly, while the villagers accused him of leaving the others in the forest to die. Despite the pain he was enduring, Ray couldn't help but smile knowingly. He had already informed everyone that the kids were still in the forest, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. The lady regarded him with utmost contempt, labeling him a cold-blooded monster she could never forgive. Meanwhile, the villagers seemed to forget that he too was just a child, all because of the color of his hair. In their eyes, he was no longer considered one of them, just a symbol of their superstitions. The villagers saw Ray as a monster, and the lady from the mob menacingly approached him, clutching a torch. Ray feared the worst, wondering if she intended to do something terrible. He thought she needed professional help, like being locked up in a mental institution. To Ray, these villagers were far more terrifying than any magical beast he had encountered. They were the real monsters. As the lady raised the burning torch, repeating her curses and vowing never to forgive him, Ray felt the weight of impending doom. It seemed he was about to meet a cruel end at the hands of humanity once again. Ray prepared to accept his fate, contemplating the humiliation of being killed by a mere torch. But then, just as the torch was about to descend, it made a metallic sound and stopped. Gary had intervened, wielding his armed guard to shield the injured Ray. The villagers interpreted this as Gary being charmed by the red-haired monster, believing that he had gone mad. Gary ridiculed the adults, berating them for their baseless assumptions and refusal to think rationally. He wouldn't let them harm the person who had saved him. Ray couldn't help but feel astonished at how the children displayed more common sense than the adults in the village. The lady's hateful gaze, as she continued to blame and curse him, merged with memories of his past life, where he had faced a similar fate. In that life, the star of calamity had brought about his demise, driven by the hatred of mighty warriors who wanted him dead. Ray's eyes snapped open as he woke from the nightmarish flashback. His injuries were slowly healing, thanks to the care they had received. Scarlet, his mother, had stayed by his side the entire time, even sleeping beside him, holding his hand. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clung to her son. Ray, in his own way, wondered how humans could be so beautiful, pondering this profound question despite his recent ordeal. Scarlet's joy knew no bounds when she realized her son was awake. She hugged him tightly, momentarily forgetting that he was still recovering. She was just so overjoyed to see him awake. Ray's sense of time was hazy, but it seemed he had been in recovery for about a week. Scarlet was overcome with emotion as she explained the situation. The two kids he had saved, Gary and Amy, were doing well, with only minor injuries. However, Bob and Kayla were still missing in the forest, and it was likely they had met a tragic fate. Reflecting on that night, Gary had gone to great lengths to shield Ray from the irrational mob of villagers, especially the lady who seemed unhinged. He repeatedly told the truth that they had ventured into the forest on their own, and Ray had saved them. However, the adults refused to believe this, convinced that Gary was under Ray's malevolent influence. Gary vehemently denied this, trying to make the villagers see reason. Amidst all this chaos, Scarlet rushed to the gathering of villagers, desperate to reach her son. She witnessed Ray surrounded by an angry mob with malicious intentions, their faces twisted with anger. Taking in the dire situation, Scarlet could only hope that reason would prevail and her son would find justice. The gentle mage, Mrs. Talon, started radiating her magical powers outwardly. She appeared ready to unleash her magic on the villagers who had wronged her son. With cold determination, she demanded to know who had harmed her child. The villagers, acting as if they had gone mad, tried to urge Scarlet to calm down. They claimed that her unconscious son, lying on the ground, was the one responsible for leading the other kids into the forest, and therefore, he should take responsibility for his actions. In the midst of the chaos, Gary was the only one thinking clearly. He attempted to reason with Scarlet, reminding her that she was a mother too and should understand the pain. But Scarlet's magical aura was so overpowering that it silenced the heartless woman who had beaten Ray. She trembled and wept as Scarlet held her son tightly, her fierce gaze making her cry out for help to rescue Bob and Kel. The villagers, however, filled with scorn, directed their anger toward Scarlet and Ray, pitying the weeping woman but continuing to trash-talk the young child, convinced that he was cursed. Scarlet heard their spiteful words, but they paid her no attention. Inside the Talon household, Scarlet comforted Ray, assuring him that everything would be all right and that the events were in the past. She didn't want her son to blame himself. Gary, who had witnessed it all, shared a detailed account of the true events with her. Filled with admiration, she commended her son for his remarkable handling of the forest situation. Ray had been out of action for a whole week, and Scarlet was eager to bring her famished son some food. As she left the room, Ray collected his thoughts and glanced at the mysterious creature before him, the adorable draconic being. Once again, a magical prompt appeared, and Ray wondered if everyone had such creatures. The icon of the blessing of the dragon's eye caught his attention, prompting him to interact with it. A surge of fiery energy engulfed the room and settled in one of his eyes, transforming it into something beyond human. Ray regained the ability to see through walls, and he watched his mother busily preparing food in the kitchen. The system evaluated her condition, warning that she needed rest soon, as her energy levels were low. Ray was astonished by this regained ability, reminiscent of his time as the Red Dragon, where he possessed a myriad of magical powers. After failing the mage aptitude test, he had believed he'd never use such abilities again. But here they were, manifesting once more, and tears welled up in his eyes as he felt a profound sense of relief. However, it seemed he could only access one ability at a time. The mysterious prompt also revealed an intermediate-grade beast crystal, likely obtained after defeating the intermediate-grade demonic wolf. Suddenly, Ray sensed something was terribly wrong. Thick black smoke filled the air, accompanied by the acrid smell of burning. It became evident that a fire was raging in parts of their house. Despite her fatigue, Scarlet rushed to Ray's room, determined to get him out of harm's way. As the flames encroached upon their sanctuary, Scarlet shielded her son, conjuring a water spell to douse the blaze. Ray activated his blessing of the dragon's eye, fixing his gaze on the source of the fire, identifying it as the deranged woman, Bob and Kale's unhinged mother. She had attempted to burn down the house of a fire dragon and a water mage. Outside the Talon family house, villagers gathered, casting accusatory glances at the burning structure, whispering blame for the fire onto the supposed cursed child, as if he were responsible. Scarlet and Ray emerged from the inferno, determined and focused. Scarlet, still wearing her apron, cast a potent spell that miraculously extinguished the raging fire. She turned her attention to the villagers, who continued their malicious whispers and clung to the belief that the fire was caused by the curse. Scarlet moved toward her son, ensuring his well-being and soothing his fears. Ray, lost in thought, commended his mother for her swift action and composure amidst the chaos. Hand in hand, they returned to the safety of their home. Ray, however, was no longer willing to play the role of the obedient victim. He resolved to seek revenge against those who desired their demise, with the crazy lady at the top of his list. The following morning, the tragedy of the previous day seemed to have vanished. The Talon house stood unharmed, showing no signs of the fire. Ray returned to his routine, informing his mother that he would be heading out to train. Scarlet, in her motherly nature, advised caution and urged him not to overexert himself. Ray stood at the familiar bridge where the fateful events had unfolded. Clutching his trusty sword and carrying 2 wooden buckets, he faced the entrance to the magic forest. Drawing his blade, he activated his dragon's eye and fiery magic, granting him sight of the creatures lurking amidst the foliage. Only beginner magical beasts inhabited this region, posing no threat he couldn't handle. Beneath the towering trees and the comforting shade, a fledgling magical creature reached for a ripe, luscious fruit, unaware of the silent blade patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ray swiftly thrust his sword into the magical beast's body, using the dragon's eye to enhance his hunting skills. He gracefully descended to the ground, and the lifeless body of the beast tumbled from the towering trees. Surveying the scene below, it was evident that he had tirelessly hunted throughout the day, with numerous magical beast corpses scattered around. Gazing upon his impressive haul, he concluded that the 20 magical beasts he had hunted down would serve his purpose for visiting the forest. He had a substantial collection of beast crystals now, though it seemed their acquisition was mostly a matter of luck. Despite slaying 20 beginner magical beasts, he had only secured 2 crystals. As he pondered the significance of these crystals, an adorable draconic creature materialized, alerting him to the acquisition of a beginner-grade beast crystal. He had obtained another one, bringing his total to 3. He decided to feed one to a lone demonic wolf pup that emerged from the woods. To his surprise, the pup transformed into energy and entered his body, successfully taming it. He could now summon it at will. Curious about potential side effects, he sought answers from the little draconic creature, which assured him there were none. Another system alert revealed that he had unlocked the second ability out of 1,000 thanks to the successful taming. With pressing matters to attend to, Rei activated his dragon's eye and scoured the forest, finally discovering two familiar figures concealed within a mountainous area. With malevolent intent in his eyes, he walked into a dark cavern, where he found the remains of the siblings, Bob and Kale. In just a week, their flesh, blood, and organs had been devoured by the beasts of the magic forest. Rei entered the dark cavern, the final resting place of Bob and Kale. The skeletal remains of the siblings lay there, a grim reminder of their fate. Carefully, he removed their tattered clothes and placed them in one of the buckets. To his surprise, the other bucket was filled with a crimson-red substance. Leaving the remains behind, Rei exited the cavern, never looking back. It was the dead of night when he returned to the Talon house. His mother scolded him gently for staying out so late and pushing himself when he hadn't fully recovered. Rei responded like any other kid, and Scarlet began to worry about his rebellious streak. She informed him that his father, Jake, would be returning in a couple of days, and they could train together. Rei, now filled with excitement, couldn't wait to show his progress to his father. Scarlet, in her motherly mode, ordered him to put his blanket on properly, and he obediently complied. As the night grew deeper and the village quieted down, Rei sneaked out of the house and into the storage room where he kept his things. With buckets in hand, he embarked on a mission. His destination was Bob and Kale's house, where their deranged mother resided. In the darkness of the night, a persistent thumping and knocking sound echoed faintly. Holding a lantern, the lady was awoken from her sleep and ventured outside to investigate. She angrily called out to the person outside to stop knocking at such a late hour, but the noise persisted. With a glimmer of hope, she wondered if her sons, Bob and Kale, had finally come home. Opening the door, she called out for her sons, hoping they were nearby. In her yard, she found a tattered piece of clothing, confirming it as Kale's. Falling to her knees, she shivered at the sight. With renewed hope, she called out loudly, asking if Kale was nearby. She followed a trail of child-sized footprints, picking up a lantern and running deeper into the magic forest. As she approached the bridge leading into the forest's outskirts, she noticed the darkness around her. Even with a lantern in her hands, she knew it wasn't safe to go any further. But she couldn't help herself. Behind her, a red-haired figure watched from a perch in a tree. Suddenly, a noise startled her, and she quickly turned around to see where it came from. Beyond the bridge, the tattered clothes of her other son, Bob, hung from a tree branch, swaying in the wind. Rei quietly observed everything, following his plan. With his dragon's eye active, he saw countless small but savage magic beasts lurking in the darkness of the forest. The lady rushed deeper into the danger zone, pleading for her sons to stop running away and come home. As she screamed for her boys, Rei held a rope tied to a bucket of crimson substance above his target. With a snap, he released the rope, and the crimson substance splattered onto the lady. Panic filled her as she looked around to find her assailant. Rei jumped down and faced her, reverting to her contemptuous attitude. She pointed at him, blaming him for her misfortune. With his inhuman dragon's eye activated, she berated him, demanding he bring her children back. She charged forward but was halted by the hungry eyes of countless magic beasts surrounding her, drawn by the crimson substance. Rei watched as the lady who had tried to kill him and his mother was torn apart by the legion of magic beasts. The next day, the villagers whispered and gossiped with a more serious tone. The news had finally hit everyone, making them believe the curse was real. They transitioned from scorn to genuine fear of the Talon family after the lady's demise became public. Rei walked close to them, and the fear in their eyes was evident. They greeted him with good morning and praised his dedication to training in the early hours. The villagers had a change of heart now that they knew what Rei was capable of. Walking away from the relieved crowd, Rei couldn't help but notice that new rumors were circulating. With a faint smile, he thought the new status quo wasn't too bad. He liked it. As he approached the Talon household, several combat-worn horses caught his attention. The sight of these cavalry horses hinted at something significant. Excitement filled him as he opened the door, ready to greet his father. But what he found inside was an air of defeat and sadness. Armored soldiers looked crushed, and his mother knelt beside the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. Something had gone terribly wrong. Rei pushed past the armored troops and rushed to his mother's side, asking what had happened. In a shaky voice, she explained that his father was seriously ill. Ray approached his father, who was now emaciated and convulsing, a stark contrast to his usually lively self. Jake's condition was terrifying. Ray activated the blessing of the dragon's eye and observed his father's condition. His aura was unlike anything Ray had seen in any living being. Jake struggled to speak, repeatedly mentioning the shadows. An armored soldier explained that Jake had been infected with the plague of the shadows while trying to protect a villager from fearsome shadow beasts. Ray couldn't recall anything about these shadows or the plague. He wondered how this world had changed after he, the legendary Red Dragon, died. Starlet thanked the soldiers for bringing her husband home, and they apologized for their failure. Beside the bed, Ray focused on his system prompt, hoping to find a way to help his father recover. In his previous life as a legendary Red Dragon, he possessed powerful spells, including one to dispel curses and black magic. But unlocking that spell seemed impossible in his current weakened state. Turning to his mother, Ray asked if he could become stronger by joining the prestigious Avrian Knight Academy. Scarlet, tears in her eyes, reassured him that he would indeed become stronger, just like his father had at the same academy. Ray now had a newfound determination to excel as a warrior. Ray had made a firm decision. He vowed to his mother that he would ace the test and become a student at the esteemed Avrian Knight Academy, all to find a way to save his father. It was a remarkable transformation from his earlier desire to destroy humanity, now driven by the determination to save a single human life. Seeing her son embrace such a heady burden with youthful vigor, Scarlet couldn't help but hug him tightly, tears welling up. She expressed her unwavering belief that if anyone could succeed, it would be Ray. Her faith in her son was unwavering. Meanwhile, in a foreboding religious building, a massive dark crystal ball was surrounded by mysterious figures clad in black robes and hoods. They gazed at the images within the crystal ball, believing that a prophecy had been foretold, and the world was on the brink of great change. Their attention fixated on a young boy with vibrant red hair, pondering whether he would bring redemption or calamity to the world. The future remained uncertain, and their actions would be determined by the boy's impact. An elderly man in a dark hood ordered the congregation to inform the knights about the prophecy, urging them to find the red-haired boy as soon as possible. A mysterious figure addressed as the Master Elder declared that they would follow the boy if he brought redemption, but would not hesitate to resort to destruction if he brought calamity. Back in the town, festive banners adorned the streets, and a joyous atmosphere permeated the air. The townspeople eagerly gathered, anticipating an event they'd been waiting for. Excitement filled the air as they patiently awaited the main event. Some had even lined up before dawn to secure a prime viewing spot. The parade commenced with armored knights in lavish carriages, igniting cheers and applause from the crowd. However, what the commoners truly yearned to see were the heavily armored men in front of the majestic green banner. Their arrival was met with adoration, and townsfolk couldn't help but swoon over the dashing Sir Delbert's looks. The center of town came into view, and the grand town square, in front of the massive town hall, awaited the procession. A solitary magic puppet occupied the square's center, surrounded by hopeful young candidates seeking entry to the Avrian Knight Academy. The crowd's cheers were hushed with a simple sword drop, signaling the beginning of the examination. One of the master knights, Winford, took the lead, welcoming everyone to the night examination. He introduced himself and his fellow knights, Sir Delbert and Sir Bernardo, who were acting as proctors. The assessment was open to children aged 5 and above, and the audience cheered in anticipation. Among the hopeful candidates, 2 familiar faces stood out. Ray concealed his vibrant red hair with a hood, determination gleaming in his eyes. Gary stood confidently at the front of the crowd, sporting an optimistic smile on his face. Winford, the knight overseeing the examination, announced that the sword puppet was ready and candidates could step forward as the first test officially commenced. It was evident that some strings had been pulled to secure one of these puppets for Ray. The town square buzzed with anticipation as a heavy-set boy approached the sword puppet, clutching a wooden sword. He underestimated the puppet, thinking he could overpower it with sheer strength. With a swift strike, the puppet sent him flying into the air, failing the challenge in a mere second. His parents, initially enthusiastic, were left shocked and embarrassed by their son's defeat. Sir Bernardo promptly declared the failure and called the next candidate forward. Ray remembered his father's advice. He had to defeat a level 1 wooden puppet. Observing the puppet, Ray noted that it appeared immobile, but its defensive and counterattacking speed rivaled that of an adult. His heightened senses, thanks to the beast crystals he had acquired, allowed him to overhear the knight's whispered conversation. Delbert expressed disdain for testing commoners and suggested that knights should only come from noble blood. Even Winfried found Delbert's sentiments excessive. The examinations had gone on for many rounds with no successful candidates. Just as Delbert voiced his impatience, the sound of a wooden sword hitting the ground signaled Gary's success. Sir Bernardo announced Gary's passing, and the villagers cheered, claiming they knew all along that he was special. Gary acknowledged Ray with a thumbs up and a bright smile, making Ray blush with embarrassment. His actions had drawn the attention of the entire town square. Veteran knight Winfried took an interest in Ray, while Delbert's expression soured upon seeing a red-haired child. Ray removed his hood, revealing his red hair, causing the crowd to erupt with malicious murmurs and whispers. He was labeled the infamous cursed child, believed to bring nothing but misfortune, even to his own father. The crowd protested that such a monster could never become a knight. Sir Bernardo instructed Ray to prepare as the next candidate, granting him a minute before the test would begin. Meanwhile, the disinterested Delbert approached, expressing his disbelief in prophecies, suggesting that if the prophecy were true, it would signify something significant. Ray confidently strode toward the sword puppet, catching Sir Bernardo's attention with a sinister look. From behind the puppet, he tampered with its settings, activating the level 3 trial. The puppet wasted no time, rushing toward Ray. Sir Winfried and Bernardo sensed something was amiss with the puppet's configuration and shouted a warning. Despite the danger, Ray remained composed, gripping his wooden sword with unwavering confidence.